What happens when a pandemic removes the community experience? Kelly Straughan, the Executive Artistic Director at Workman Arts, is our guest this week, and we talk about the importance of mental health and what happens when a community built on being together is forced to physically distance. We also chat about the steps Workman Arts has taken to create spaces where those organic moments, the ones that only come from being together, can happen in a digital space.
My name is Kelly Straughan. I'm the Executive Artistic Director at Workman Arts. So Workman Arts is an art and mental health organization. We serve artists with lived experience of mental health or addiction issues, and we do that through daily art classes. We also have our Rendezvous with Madness Festival. We have our Being Seen art exhibition. And then in terms of, the daily art classes, we have what we call member artists. So right now we have 425 member artists. It doesn't cost anything to become a member. Artists simply identify as having lived experience of mental health or addiction issues. We don't ask for a doctor's note. The most important thing is that the artist feels that they can benefit from, what we offer at Workman Arts. And right now, we are about to move shortly, but right now we are at 651 Dufferin Street. And, what we're able to offer our artists are, a beautiful theater where they can rehearse or where they can, have presentations if they wish. We have a number of art classrooms. We have a media lab where they can edit their films, where they can work on their music. And then, we also offer 25 plus art classes a week where they can, learn and grow their practice.
Over the past few weeks, Workman Arts has been hosting a series of mental health check-ins. Can you tell me a little bit more about those and who they are for?
The mental health check-ins, that was something that was really member-driven. So we had artists that are part of Workman Arts that really wanted to create a community where people can come together and just talk about how difficult it is to be an artist at this time. So there were sort of different headings, but really all under the theme of what it is to be an artist in the time of COVID-19. And I think the real strength in that is that, the arts are by nature precarious, that, the arts are by nature sort of a community experience. And so what is happening when you really up that precarity and where you sort of remove that community experience? And I think there's real power in people coming together and just talking through their individual experiences. So we've done, I believe, 5 so far, and they've obviously been in an online space, and they have a limited number of people that can be involved so that the conversation can really flow and people feel like they have a chance to be heard.
You're using Zoom for these mental health check-ins, and the capacity seems to be around 12 people per session. Can you tell me a little bit about the rationale behind that number?
Yes, so we have been using Zoom, and very quickly, I imagine, like many other organizations, you're sort of quickly analyzing all of these platforms, with the week that you have to kind of make that pivot. So certainly, I think like many organizations, we chose Zoom. And for the mental health check-ins, it's really a number that I think the person leading it. So as I mentioned, it's our member artists who kind of stepped forward and said, I want to offer this for other member artists. And that they get to determine, how many people they think is a manageable group, that everyone will have a chance to speak, that there can be some natural dialogue. And so we followed their lead on that around what feels like a manageable number in a chat. And what's been lovely to see, is that when it's artists speaking to other artists, it's again creating that community of people just saying, are you going through the same thing I'm going through? Are you still feeling motivated to practice your art? How are you practicing your art? And that's great because I think the moment that, the staff were stepping in and leading it, as leaders of arts organizations, it completely changes the spin of a conversation. And so it's been lovely to see that it's artists talking about the precarity of it all, about how they're managing, how they're maintaining creativity. So yeah, it's been really lovely to see.
That's great. And like you said, a very intimate one too. I find a lot of the arts organizations are trying to engage as many of their members as possible in their audience. And what happens when you have these 500 people, essentially webinars, is there's no back and forth, right? It's just a one-way communication. And I think with 12 or so people, you have the opportunity to have a very intimate conversation, a very honest one, really.
Yeah, and I think we've all been on those Zoom calls. I mean, even with friends, where it becomes the unmanageable conversation where you're all talking over each other.
Why is taking care of one's mental health so important right now?
I mean, it's so important right now. Um, one of the prime predictors of poor mental health is social isolation. And so here we are at a time where we are being asked to be socially isolated. And Workman Arts, one of our prime missions is to reduce social isolation, and we do that through offering the art classes that gets people, many times it can be what gets them out of their apartments, out of their homes, in a community that understands them. So the moment that you take that away and you say, no, stay home and isolate yourself, it becomes, very worrisome for organizations like Workman Arts. We think, how do we help? So how do we pivot and how do we change what we do? So like many organizations, we've moved into the online sphere. We've taken many of our classes. So we usually run about 25 classes a week. We now have 15 classes a week we've been able to offer online. So that's been a good start, a really good start. But one of the things we know, many of the artists we serve are on fixed or limited incomes. And so it's, they may not have access to technology. They may not have access to reliable internet, Wi-Fi. And so we recognize right now that while we are able to, I think it's a good step that we've made, there is a very vulnerable population that right now, that's what we're trying to figure out, is how do we serve this very vulnerable population.
This brings me to accessibility and its importance. How does that translate to a digital space?
In some ways, it's more accessible, and in some ways, less accessible. So one of the things we've learned is that, especially for people that potentially, have fears around being out in public, particularly now where you're afraid to touch any surface, that this can actually be more accessible for them, that people are agoraphobic, that kind of thing, are so happy we're finally offering, online courses where they can participate, feel like they're part of a community from, their own home. And then in some ways it can be less accessible. We certainly know that, especially now when everything's closed, our members who want to participate in classes don't have a way to get to Wi-Fi. And so some have been trying to go into, the TTC subway and see if they can access some Wi-Fi. So it's particularly inaccessible for people who do not have devices and do not have access to internet, that they are very, very lonely right now. And we're looking for ways that we can, get cellular enabled iPads so that we can rent them out. There would be no charge, but rent them out to people so that they can participate in the classes.
That is so great. You're essentially taking the technology to those who don't have it. What has been the response to the community you serve?
By and large, it's been very positive. Everyone recognizes that it's, just a solution to a problem. And I think, with any new technology, I think the world experienced our discomfort with, figuring out Zoom platforms and digital platforms, and, our artists were exactly the same. The first week of classes, there was a lot of, tech support. And then once there's a comfort with online, and also teachers learning how to teach online, it's a very different thing. And so over the weeks, it's been nice to see that kind of smooth out, and that, the instructors are figuring out exactly how to offer the course. So it's been positive. And certainly we hope that over time we'll be able to continue to grow, what we've been offering. And I should mention in the digital sphere as well, one of the things that we also felt was, the members, when they walk into our building, they have the staff to talk to, and a lot of our days are just filled up. You sort of walk past someone and have a little chit chat, and we were, the staff was saying, how do we still do that? How do we still create that community while we're online. So we started to do virtual front desk is what we call it. And so people can call in during certain hours and a staff member will answer. And if they have questions about anything, they can ask about Workman Arts, or they can just chit chat if they want to about what's happening in their day or whatever. So we've been offering that. And then we've also been offering virtual coffee hours where members can meet up and talk to other members. And that's facilitated by our members. So that's really nice to see that community also start to come together.
What are some concerns and anxieties about operating in a digital space? And how do you convert what you've created for a physical setting to a digital one?
It's interesting, thinking about how do you create community in an online world, and especially because I would say, we've almost been a bit behind the curve at Workman Arts. We've really felt that it's so important for people to be in the building together, that, we haven't really explored what are our digital options. So the silver lining in all of this is it's really forced us to look at what we can do in an online world. And I think it will forever change our business, which is a good thing. Because there are people who, when they are having a very, very bad day, when, they're really struggling even to, get up, let alone leave the house and, get all the way to Workman Arts, that the offerings online can really, be something that can pull them out of a really terrible day. And now it's, when we are able to meet in person again, how do we continue some of that online offering? That there's, I think a real positive thing that can come out of this. And then, obviously there's, always the downside that I don't think anything replaces people meeting in person. And I know that our members are feeling that. I know our staff is feeling that. What you can't replicate in the digital space is just the things that happen throughout a day when you're with a group of people, and our members, we have, on any given day between, 50 to 100 members that are coming through our building for all the various classes. So you end up so many times just stopping and having a quick chit chat. We have a kitchen where we are. So as you're making lunch, you're getting caught up on, what's happening in people's lives. And we don't have that anymore. And that part, boy, if you could replicate that online, that would be amazing. So it has its strengths, it has its weaknesses for sure.
How important is experimentation right now for your classes, your content, and platform, really? Is it just Zoom you're using, or are you experimenting with others?
While the classes themselves, we've just been running on Zoom, we're in the lead up to our Rendezvous with Madness Festival, that high likelihood we will be doing that online and in a virtual space. It's a multidisciplinary festival, so it's anchored by a film festival, but we have theater, dance, visual art, performance art, stand-up comedy. So in looking at all of our options, there are specific platforms for stand-up comedy where you feel like you're actually in an audience, because they know what's lacking in stand-up comedy is, if you're not hearing anything and the person's just telling a joke, it's a very odd experience. But they do have platforms where you can hear, the audience laugh and you really feel like you're in a space together. So, we are looking at, things for some of our live performances. For film festivals, there's a challenge streaming that content and the kind of technology you need to properly stream. So we're investigating that technology. So certainly I feel like, while we found a good solution for our classes, we need more sophisticated solutions for our festival.
What are some other initiatives that Workman Arts is doing?
One of the things that, we also offered at Workman Arts is what we call our food and transportation program, food share program. What we know about many of our artists is that sometimes they were making the choice between being able to afford to come to class, the cost of the TTC fare, and, being able to eat that day. So when, and this was sort of a big survey that we put out a few years ago, and we thought, well, no one should have to make that choice. So we started a food share and transportation program that was funded by TD, that is funded by TD. And all of a sudden, we found in this virtual world, we obviously, that's not on our expense line right now, because people aren't in our space. So we thought, how can we, sort of continue this program in a virtual way? So we opened it up as a bursary, and people could apply to receive some money to help with groceries, or the transportation to go and get groceries, to pay for cab fare so you don't have to drag your groceries on the subway. So that's been a really nice shift for our organization. And we kept the application really simple, and then we've been able to hand out small amounts, between $50 and $100 to our members, and we're hoping that we'll be able to continue that. So that's been a nice little shift for our organization.
You mentioned TD there for a little bit. How has your relationship with your funders and sponsors changed? Has it changed at all? And how are they reacting to the digital pivots you've been doing?
When all of this first started, we were all in the same boat. I think the funders were trying to figure out what this meant for the short term and the long term. And what was really nice to see was immediately kind of all levels of government and from the arts councils, they were assuring us that funding will not be cut, that we will not be penalized for potentially not being able to do some of our public offerings that we've always done, festivals or showcases or what have you. So that was nice to hear. And then what's been nice to see is actually some foundations and also, arts councils shift as well to offer very specific COVID-19 support, and support come out for artists, and also funds that now we can apply to help us respond to this, acute phase that we are in. And that's been great because, as I mentioned before, our artists, many of them don't have access to technology. So that's what we've discovered is a great need for our organization at this time. And we've seen now funds open up where we can apply specifically for what we need during COVID-19.
It's so great to hear that the funders are staying engaged and being transparent with their communications. What advice would you give to other organizations based on what you've learned so far?
Because it's all been moving so quickly, I don't know that I feel that so sure of everything that I can offer advice. I think what's been lovely to see with the arts community is a number of town halls, whether it's run by the Toronto Alliance for the Performing Arts. I know that MANO, that's the Arts Service Organization for Film. That there's been a lot of coming together where people can share information or just share their difficulties. Because I think right now we are all struggling together, trying to figure out what's happening. So it's the advice is, just keep trying to connect with other people and share the information and share where you're at, because this is so unscripted. We've never seen this before. We really don't know how long it's going to last. And certainly I think specifically within the live theater, performing arts community, we're pretty sure that no one's gathering till 2021, and potentially longer. And so, how do you even begin to survive as an organization if one of your primary revenue sources are ticket sales? How do you recover from that? So it's really tough. Just supporting each other in this moment, I think, is really important.
No, but it's so great advice. Keep collaborating, keep talking to each other, and keep being generous, because the only way out of this is if we do it together.
Yeah.
And finally, where can we find out more about Workman Arts, and how can we support you during this time?
Our website is workmanarts.com. All the information about our Rendezvous with Madness Festival, our Being Seen art exhibition, is there. And then for those artists that feel like they would want to become a member, all the information on how to become a member is there. And membership is completely free for artists. All they do is self-identify as having lived experience of mental health or addiction issues. We don't need a doctor's note. And then if they have, an art practice that they feel, would really benefit, at Workman Arts, that they would like to have studio space or be in our classes, then they can find out how to join there.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for this very insightful chat about how Workman Arts is continuing to engage its community through constant communication. Whether it's from the mental health check-ins that you do regularly or trying to recreate that in-person organic chit-chat session through your virtual front desk and the coffee hours and the bursaries so artists can have that little sense of certainty during this very, very uncertain time.
All right, well, thank you for interviewing me. I'm interested to see this series. Actually, I have been on the Business for the Arts website quite a bit. I mean, we're part of the Arts Fest program, obviously. But yeah, it's been really great to see the amount of video content there and being shared. So it's great.
If you found value in this episode, do us a favor and share it with a friend. It'll help us spread these best practices and bits of advice to those who may need them.